about the contemplative life. So, dozing off, just think of yourselves as being held in the hands of God.
No.
I think so often, those of us that are activists, it is challenging to find the balance of activity and the contemplative. And I'm sorry, I don't know your name even though we talked. Phil. Phil was mentioning, wow, yeah, but he was moved to action. That's absolutely true, and there is a time for action. But in my experience, that action comes from a different place. It comes from a nudge inside that then results in something, an action, that you don't know what the consequences are going to be, but it feels like the right thing. And I'm sure everybody's had that experience. But it's listening, having enough space in our lives to listen for the nudges. That's the challenge. Because usually in our society, the idea is you've got your strategic plan. You have your 15-point program. You divide it up into annual objectives. And then you can break it out into measurable quantities, and we can have accountability and progress. And not a heck of a lot of contemplative life in the process. And so the challenge, I think, the countercultural challenge is to do both planning, but a willingness to let go. And it's to do the best we can, creating all these great ideas, but then willing to let it morph and change, to not hold on too tight. And in the bibliography, who's sitting over here, I hope I put it in here. Yes. The book by Gerald May. Gerald May's book, Will and Spirit. I'm sure probably some of you know it. It is the best psychology of the contemplative life. And for me, it has been an enriching piece. Just trying to figure out how do we move forward in a world that's not geared to this stuff. So, some of what I'm going to talk about is Gerald May, some of what I'm going to talk about is just me, some of what I'm going to talk about is probably stuff that I've heard elsewhere, but I'm not sure. So, to start this, I want to start with a poem. Because, and this is called Living Waters, one of the challenges of living the contemplative life, living social justice from the inside out, is that we're not in control. What a depressing thought. I'd much rather be in control most of the time. And I think the world would be a lot better if I was. But that's the challenge, is because we're called to places where we may be surprised. And so I want to share my poem called Living Waters. And it goes like this. Impetuous me favors the passionate tumult of spring river flooding. Sensuous me favors the indolent caress of summer river flowing. Reflective me favors the penetrating seep of autumn river trickling. Even aloof shy me favors the chilled reserve of winter river freezing. But all of me resists evaporation. I resist the sucking, pulling, warm air wresting me from known boundaries. I resist drifting unseen to unknown parts. I resist the uncertainty of unformed floating, yearning rather to surround rocks and carve new paths. I resist the ambiguous, foggy drift. But luckily, at times, I am yanked into air, there, beholding earth's anguish, weeping, raining, puddling, perhaps the beginning of an exuberant spring.
Is it in the book?
Yeah. 14 of my children are in the book. But Gerald May talks about the contemplative life. And what I want to share is that some of my experience, I want to give you some of the basics and then talk about just my experience, kind of a little testimony. But what Gerald May says is that the contemplative life he says the only thing that we bring is a willing heart. That's the only thing that we bring to a contemplative life is a willing heart. And so I've come to describe this life of trying to live in the contemplative as walking willing. This gets me in trouble. But walking willing is all about just being open to responding to the needs around. And knowing that we're one body. Remember Paul's thing about the one body? Remember that? And, okay, we're one body, many members, but one body. Not everybody's an eye or an ear or a hand. We've all got a different part. Well, I sort of had this insight in doing meditation one day. I think maybe I'm stomach acid in the body. So, very important for metabolizing food and a bit of energy. But in large quantities could be a little problematic, right? So, but the way I see this is walking willing to the place where we're called. And what it means, and what Gerald May says is the two things that shut down the contemplative life are fear and grasping. Okay, fear. Fear is pretty easy to understand, right? It's when we get frightened, when you get afraid, you think, how's this going to work out? What's going to happen? That pull up the drawbridge moment, where you want to say, I got to protect them. It's Stephen Colbert saying, but I need my stuff. I have to hold on to my stuff. It's all of those things that I've got to do it alone is usually where the fear comes. Or what if so-and-so says something? Fear shuts down the contemplative life. Think of the story of the Transfiguration. This is where we learn this. Remember the Transfiguration? Jesus takes Peter, James, and John up on a high hill. And I love Peter. Peter's my patron, okay? I'm Simone for Simon Peter. And Peter, what happens is, the cloud comes, and Peter's all excited because Elijah and Moses are there. This is really cool. Lord, let's pitch 3 tents. Let's hold on to this moment. Let's make sure we can stay here on the mountaintop. And then there's thunder. And Peter cowers in fear. And the experience is over. It's done. Fear shuts it down. The glory of getting older is that we discover we don't have to be afraid. As long as we're in relationship, as long as we're connected, as long as we know the values, as long as we're creating a community that nurtures a prophetic imagination, as long as we're doing it together, We no longer have to be afraid of anything. Now, we can be nervous about a few things, but it's not fear. Let me give you an example. Network, my beloved organization, had some really serious economic challenges in the recession. It was called poverty. And at one point, we were having to decide what bills we could pay, and we couldn't pay them all at one time, and how we could negotiate this. I mean, it was horrible, horrible, horrible. I worried about it so much. I was such an idiot. I worried about it so much that I ended up I assumed giving myself shingles. That was horrible, painful. It certainly distracted me from our money worries, but I wasn't sure there was much else good to recommend it. One day I do meditation every morning. One morning I was just in tears because we were just like swamped. And so I said to God, all right, Uncle, I won't hold on. I'm not going to hold on to my plan. If you want this done, you got to do it. I'm doing the best I can. It's over to you, Mildred. I mean, I can't do this. Do you know? I should have done that much earlier. I don't understand how this works. I don't believe in divine intervention. This messes with my theology. But that noon, I get a call from Sister Honora, a daughter of Charity, saying, "Oh, Simone, this is Honora." "Oh, hi, Honora, that's fine." "Oh, you remember me?" "Of course I remember you. You're great, yada, yada. Anyway, so she said, well, we have a newer member who's a lawyer. Could Network use a lawyer for a lobbyist?" I say, "Oh, Nora, could we ever? But, we have no money." She says, "Oh, I know. We'll pay for her. It'll be okay. Would that help?" It was like I burst into tears. "Oh, sorry, God, I should have relied on you sooner." But the fact is, that's the story. So what do you say? Surrender, not holding on to my plans, not being too much afraid, trusting, and believing that we will never be left orphaned. Right. We will never be left orphaned. And, what do? So then, we come to the amazing event. Several of you have mentioned that all of this beloved experience that's been going on is, nourishing for you all. It's fabulous. It's amazing. Well, I'm totally surprised because what happened, the story of how we got famous, all started with the Affordable Care Act and the fact that I wrote the nuns' letter for the nuns to sign in support of Obamacare. And we won. And one of the sisters who signed the letter said to me after all the brouhaha about it with the bishops, said, "Oh, Simone, don't worry about it. The girls played the boys." And for once, the girls won. And as she said it, the boys are pissed. But it was that resulted in Network being named in the censure in 2012. Okay, 2010 was Obamacare. Oh, but what you have to know, okay, so 2010 was Obamacare. We passed the Affordable Care Act. 2012, April 14th, we had this great 40th anniversary party for Network. Our organization was founded 42 years ago. And I brought some of our magazines. I know a bunch of you know it, but this one is Camden Kids that do community organizing. I love this one, kids. This is our summer bus trip. This was Nuns on the Bus from last summer when we went out on immigration reform. Stories from the bus. And this is our fourth quarter. It comes out quarterly. But this is the fourth quarter one about men in poverty. Because we don't often talk, we usually talk about women and children in poverty. Guys are struggling really hard, and there's some really important stories that need to be shared. So this was a different thing. So I brought some for you. I say it's my Jehovah's Witness activity because I force them on people. But the way you know I'm Catholic is that I'll charge you for a second one. So anyway, and then I'm supposed to tell you, if you want to contribute to Network, you're more than welcome to. We have a C3, which is tax deductible, which is beneficial to some, and a C4, which is a lobby, which is you don't get the tax deduction, but you do good work. So feel free, join us, be a part of us. Anyway, okay, now I did my commercial. And I also brought, this is our elevator speech about who we are, and this is just plain swag for the bus, because everybody wants to be a nun on the bus these days. Well, what happened at April 14th at our 40th anniversary party was the big question was, how do we get our name out there? How do we let people know we're lobbying on Capitol Hill for 40 years, and we have a really good reputation on the Hill, but nobody knew us around the country? So we had little ideas, because we didn't have much money, so we were going to take out a Google ad, and we were going to ask a member to get a member. Well, what I've learned is you have to be very careful what you pray for, because on April 18th, 4 days later, the Vatican answered our prayer. I mean, look at it. They named our organization in the censure. The Leadership Conference of Women Religious Leaders were still in Rome. They weren't available for the press. They had a very difficult road ahead. I didn't have any direct connection to Rome, so I could talk to the press. And as they say, the rest is history. But I got very bored very quickly talking about Catholic sisters, because we never talk about ourselves. That's not what we're about. We're always about mission. So my prayer, my meditation was, help, Lord, let us know how to use this moment for mission. Help, help, help. And what came to me was, remember that story of the Samaritan woman at the well? And Jesus is out in the strange land. Remember, he's in Samaria. It's the heat of the day. This woman has snuck out to the well because she's the outcast from the town. Not only does Jesus do the verboten thing of a man talk to a woman, but a Jew talked to a Samaritan. Not only did he talk to her, but he asked her for help. Now, my experience after the censure was Catholics were so blessedly angry and depressed. It was this big circle. Everybody I asked for help was like, oh, we got to reform the church, and we can't reform the church, so we reform the government. We got to reform the government. We can't reform the government until we reform the church. Everybody was just in that circle. It was awful. They were no help at all. And so when I realized the Samaritan woman, for me what it meant was go ask others for help. Go outside of our regular circle. And that's what I did. And this group came together on May 14th in our office, and at the end of an hour-and-a-half meeting, we were going on the road. We were going to speak out against the Ryan budget, lift up the works of Catholic sisters, and hopefully in the process, make a difference. Use this moment of notoriety for mission. So, and then we had nuns on the bus. Kaboom, as we would say on the bus. But it was all because of listening for mission. And this listening for mission means that we are called in this moment to be for others. What Pope Francis is saying is that it's every Christian's responsibility to be for others. And it is hugely challenging. Now, all of this in my personal prayer just keep being given. In December of 2011, that's like 4 months before the censure, I was doing retreat, and I do a sort of a Christian Zen meditation thing. I've done it for years. And so I'm on retreat where you sit for an inordinate number of hours looking at a wall. It's the most absurd thing in the whole world, but it's the biggest gift of my life. And Pat Hawk, who's a Redemptorist priest, who's a retreat director, he pushed me to radically accept the people that I have on my mistake of God list. Have you ever noticed Mitch McConnell has no lips? It's just a mistake. God on an off day. Paul Ryan does not know he has a heart. One of you asked me if I had met with Ryan. I actually have once. Now, last week he turned me down for a meeting. It's interesting. I'm going to go back at him in February, see if I can get one. But he has no heart. I'm telling him stories about the impact of his policies. Oh, they're not the targets. They're not the targets. The Congressional Budget Office scored it really well. It's like, oh, that it would make monetary savings at the decimation of families. Hello? That's a Christian, Catholic perspective. So Pat pushed me to radically accept everyone. Everyone. Oh, how annoying. And finally, in meditation and prayer and with the gift of grace of the love of God, I got to that place where I could say yes. They're doing an important piece. They're part of the body of Christ. I cannot leave them out. Even toenails on the body of Christ are important. That's why I think I'm stomach acid. I'm in a little trouble. But to know we're in this together. So I go to Pat. I have 3 more days left to retreat. And I think, oh, fabulous. I could be holy for 3 days. It's really nice to be in this very spiritual, holy place. You know those times where you feel holy? Isn't it wonderful? It's really consolation. And so Pat then says to me, now add in fighting. What? Fighting? Like fighting? Oh man, it made me mad because I had just gotten to the holy place of being unity. But now to add in fighting. So, well, what happens in Zen is that you go talk to the teacher, and when the teacher's tired of you in your interview, the teacher rings a bell. Well, Pat always found me mildly amusing, and so he would ring the bell, and I'd be in the middle of sputtering. So that meant you go back to your place, because the next person's going to come in, and so you... Anyway, so I sat with this for a while, but you know what happened for me? Is that I came to know this duality of radical acceptance and fighting. You would think they're like opposites or like separate, but really they come together. And when you put them together, my image is it's like fire. Because what you do is, remember, you know how fires, you get the log and heat and flame, and you get some destruction, but you get purification, you get, it's such a kinetic, boiling reality, right? It's very attractive, it draws you in. Well, so I had this powerful experience, finally, of both radically accepting and fighting. And I came to see that fighting wasn't fighting against, it's fighting for. And that when I don't make you the opposition, then together we can fight for something. And I see you, even if you were on my mistake of God list, as an important piece of the conversation. Does that make sense? I hope. It's very hard to talk about spiritual life out loud. And then what happened for me after the censure is this fire very quickly got changed to the sense of the burning bush. And listen to this. Listen, go back and read your Exodus. It's Exodus chapter 3. It's fabulous. And remember, Moses is out in the desert. He's taking care of sheep. He's sort of hiding out. And he sees this bush burning, but it's not being consumed. And he's curious. So he goes across. And God calls to him out of the bush. And God says, well, don't come any nearer. Take off your sandals. This is a holy place. This is a holy place. So he does. And then God says, I have indeed seen the misery of my people. I have heard them crying for help on account of their taskmasters. Yes, I am well aware of their sufferings, and I have come to rescue them. Isn't that the story of so many of our people right now who feel oppressed by taskmasters, who are crying for help, who are alienated in this time? And what I realized is this whole idea of radical acceptance and fighting has taken hold in the bus. And this beloved bus, which is only, this, I don't know, what were we, 50 feet long, and this big billboard on the side. But it became like a locust for the burning bush. Because the burning bush became about a place where people could see that their pain was being touched, and it was releasing some hope into the darkness. And that piece is what I think we're each called to right now, in our time. In our nation, it is so difficult because people are struggling so economically, personally, relationally. My nephew got married 1.5 years ago, and he and his new wife are having a horrible time, partially because her job keeps sending her all over and they have hardly any time together. But she doesn't dare quit her job because they can't survive. The economic pressures on young people right now are horrible. I never thought about what student debt does to the next generation. The constriction of creativity because of the need to get a well-paying job in order to pay back student loans. I mean, it's chilling. There are a lot of people who are crying on account of their taskmasters. And how can we be a burning bush of hope? How can we let God flame up in our lives in this moment? It's a huge, glorious, gifted challenge. Now, the other piece is that then, okay, so it's the burning bush. That's the beginning of Judaism, really. But in our Christian tradition, the other flame that we have is the fire of Pentecost, right? My community is dedicated to the Holy Spirit, so hey, I'm all about this. I'm on top of this one. Our big communal feast is Pentecost, and I was telling some of you, I'm going to celebrate, I can't believe this, I'm going to celebrate 50 years of entering my community this Pentecost, so it's really amazing. It's very exciting. But you know that in Pentecost, it was that it wasn't so much, okay, it's the sound of wind, and that then there appeared to them tongues of as of fire. And the tongues of fire weren't located in the bush, but rather come and are above each person, each individual. So that the fire of God no longer is located out there, it becomes located in each one of us. Which is the Christian mystery, the Christian amazing reality is that we are the body of God. We embody this fire and flame. And then the miracle of Pentecost, which I always love. Peter, the humble fisherman, gets up and starts talking, and all these strangers hear him. Understood it, got it. And so my prayer is the Pentecost prayer always. It doesn't matter so much what I say when I talk to groups like yours, but just that the audience will hear what they need to hear. Whatever I say, that's fine, but that you hear what you need to hear. So that Pentecost then becomes how we embody God live in our world. And we have a responsibility to let God flame up. Let us be the locus of that love and care, where everyone is radically accepted, and where we fight for the justice pieces that we were talking about earlier. Isn't that amazing? So on the bus, what happened? Oh, glory, on the bus, a lot of things happened. But our driver, Bill, who drove both bus trips, Bill drove Elvis's last tour. Isn't that cool? Yeah, same thing. Well, we kept getting Bill to try to tell us stories. Bill, tell us stories. And Bill would say, Bill's a Southerner. And he'd say, I'm not talking about your girls' trip. I'm not talking about illnesses. You ought to be grateful. I'm going to keep them both quiet. But on the bus, what we found over and over were hugely hungry people. When we went to sites where sisters work, or there's low-income communities, where there's, on the immigration bus trip, we went through the South. I really thought it was going to be a lot harder than it was because it's not a Catholic place. We found in the low-income communities, we found community. We found people standing together. I had thought in the low-income communities it would be hard, and in the evenings when we gathered with folks quite like you all, we'd tell stories and it'd be nourishing. What I discovered was, in low-income communities where folks are working at creating community, we found, especially where Catholic sisters are, at every location we found beauty, a sense of togetherness, and a commitment to make things better together. But in the evening, when we gathered with folks, middle-class folks, what we found out was people often felt alone, fearful, alienated, and hungry for an alternative view. Now, what I have a hunch IVC's about is being little seeds of possibility in that hungry community. Because you all become little flames out there connecting hope, touching the pain of the world is real, and having an active experience of hope. You can't turn your backs on it once you're attuned to it, right? Makes you uncomfortable. At least makes me uncomfortable. But isn't it glory? It's fabulous. You cannot not do it once you know, once you're awake. So the challenge is that we have this work ahead of us. But it has got to be geared here in this listening. It's not about, well, yeah, you need strategic plans. You need all these steps. You need all the modern stuff. You need to know Twitter and Facebook and, I don't know, email, whatever else. What Pinterest, that's a new one, I guess. I don't even know what that one is. But the most important piece is that you listen deeply to the Spirit within, without. And you act on what you hear. I used earlier that image of the snow globe. That's what the contemplative life's about, is to let all that shaky up snow settle. And then listen. And some days I feel like, oh my glory, how are God on earth are we ever going to do it? And so I want to end this piece, and we can have a little conversation. But my sense was, after the first bus trip, was like, oh my glory, the hunger that exists. I began to think of our evening gatherings as the valley of Ezekiel's dry bones. Remember that story? Can these bones live again? Our people were decimated, hungry. I mean, they were just like bones, no flesh on them. Nobody had breathed on them in so long. And some of it's Catholics, but it's also beyond Catholic, too. And so this is my poem. Now, the only thing you need to know is, remember the story in Matthew about loaves and fish. This is from the story of loaves and fish. And in Matthew's gospel, there's two accounts of the loaves and fish. And one of them says at the end, which was very annoying to me, 5,000 men were fed, to say nothing of the women and children. Nothing. I mean, what are we, chuckling? So I meditated on that for a while, as I'm wont to do, because it made me mad. Why did they just count the men? But here was my insight. Only the men thought it was a miracle. The women knew they'd brought food from home, and the men were surprised. So the real miracle was sharing, but the men just didn't have a clue. So. Some things never change. Okay, so this is my poem, but it's about what we're called to. It's what we're called to. So I offer it. And it's called Loaves and Fish. I always joked that the miracle of loaves and fish was sharing. The women always knew this. But in this moment of need and notoriety, I ache, tremble, almost weep at folks so hungry, malnourished, faced with spiritual famine of epic proportions. My heart aches with their need. Apostle-like I whine. What are we among so many? The consistent 2,000-year-old ever-new response is this. Blessed and broken, you are enough. I savor the blessed, cower at the broken, and pray to be enough. Isn't that true? Our story. So we have a few minutes for conversation, and then what we're going to do is some quiet time and group discussion, and then you're back here. I have to confess, bless me, sisters and brothers, I am a limited being. My problem of walking willing means that I walk into everything. And I'm going to have to leave you after our 2 o'clock piece. I'm sorry for that. But it's because I have to go do some media stuff. So, opportunity. Sorry.
Would you repeat the last line of that?
Oh, the last line? Sure. I savor the blessed, cower at the broken, and pray to be enough. See, but it all goes back to this. Has your heart been broken open? Isn't that cool? Yeah.
I took this kind of burning book and I always love that story. And one of the things that I think is really important is that it was not consumed. So when we are being God's burning bush, and we are out there playing with God, we have to make sure, as we touch that we're not consumed. That we are that our spirit and that our ability we can burn with this fire and yet not allow ourselves to be burned.
You have no control over it. You cannot prevent yourself from being consumed. The only way we are prevented from being consumed is if we avoid fear and grasping. Fear and grasping is what consumes us. As long as I stay focused on the other, walking willing, it's fine. But the thing about grasping that I didn't understand, fear I knew, grasping, I always thought it was just holding on when I was afraid. But now I've discovered, oh my God, there's even a bigger seduction. I want to hold on to the good stuff too. The temptation to hold on to the bus. Hold on to Stephen Colbert, my fun time with him. I've had all these amazing experiences. But holding on to them shuts down the contemplative life as much as it is holding on to my fear that I'll be consumed. It's when I begin to get worried about me that then I no longer have energy, I no longer can do it. Because it's about me as opposed to being part of this body. About God flaming up in my life. So my mantra has become, the poem Gerard Manley Hopkins, The Grandeur of God. He's got this line in there, is flame up like shining from shook foil. I mean, it's glorious. But that's the deal. Let God alive in your life. Sort of a surprise. Who would have thunk it? But also look that it's out of the struggle comes the good stuff. But for the Vatican censure, which was painful, surprising, shocking, all this stuff, none of this would have happened. The Holy Spirit is alive and well. And as I told Rachel Maddow, making mischief. So. And Frank agrees. It's so cool. I know, it's kind of fun. Bob, you wanted to.
I saw something the other day, but Bernie Sanders is really taken with.
Oh my gosh, he's totally into the Pope.
You know, he's Jewish heritage, but he's really taken with the Pope. And I think it was Nancy Pelosi made the comment, said yes, so the Pope is sounding more like the nuns.
Oh my gosh.
But I had another question. Is this Gerald May, the psychiatrist, neurologist?
Yes.
Who wrote Addiction and Grace?
Yes,
Yes,
yes, yeah. He actually taught spiritual direction here in D.C. He died in '05, I think, at Shalem. Yeah, fabulous guy. I was so excited to come to D.C. because I thought maybe I could study with him, but then he was sick and died.
Yeah.
All the nerve. But I mean, that's the annoying thing, you know, is all my plans. Whenever you got plans, you just have to let them go. But sometimes plans, I had this insight about plans. I gave up my car, some of you know this, I gave up my car a few years ago because my community's poor and they need it in Los Angeles more than I needed it here. And so I made all these plans for how I could get to my favorite places, how I could get to the Arboretum, how I could get to Trader Joe's, all the important mission, you know, sites. And I live close enough to walk to the mall, to go to the Smithsonian museums. And what happens, my car goes, I weep. And on my first bike trip to the Arboretum, I always used to drive to the Arboretum and take a walk. Well, I rode to the Arboretum only to discover I needed a bench. I didn't need a walk. Anyway, it was pretty funny. So then the next couple weekends later, I'm biking over to Roosevelt Island, which is another one of my favorite spots. And I discover all these other nooks of beauty that I never knew. And I realized plans allowed me to hold on so I could let go. But that once you let go, everything's changed, and you can just laugh at your great plans. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So as we face transitions, we can think of them as transitional objects. My plans are transitional objects. They're my blankie. I'll hold on to it till something new happens. Other comments? Yeah.
I just wanted to know if the concept of compassion fatigue thinking or writing.
I think compassion fatigue, I have a hunch, is when it's too intellectualized. Too intellectualized. When it's just me reading stories and I don't know the people. I mean, in my Bible, you know, I told you I have all these people in here. Well, I mean, on the bus, Jeannie Margaret's sister brought me the picture of Margaret, who died because she didn't have health care. Because she lost her job in the recession, and when she lost her job, she lost her health care. And she ended up dying of colon cancer, even though she knew she had a propensity for it. But she couldn't afford screening. So, like, Margaret's a real person to me. I'm never going to get fatigued fighting for Medicaid expansion to make sure no more Margarets die. And then hearing from Cindy from Trinity, and I've got this woman from... a woman in St. Louis gave me a note that her brother Tom had died because he didn't have health care. He was self-employed, they couldn't afford health insurance, and got cancer. He left a widow, Sue, and 3 kids. I mean, you can't get fatigued with that, because then I would be turning my heart. I have a hunch if you're feeling fatigued, have you talked to a person recently? Sometimes it's just looking at those, I mean, some of those heartbreaking ads on television, support the Haitians or do whatever. That's too distant if we don't know it in our real lives. You know, it's not a substitute. Where's Brittany? This young woman was just amazing. Where'd she go? I was up outside of Philly at a university, and she asked to talk to me. She and a gaggle of freshmen asked me for their autographs. It was too sweet. Yeah. And then here it is. She asked if she could talk to me after the talk, after everybody left. I said, sure. Now we're talking. Here's this freshman, first woman in her family to ever go to college, an only child. During the summer, beginning of July, her mom and her mom's boyfriend had been arrested for something. They had no money, so they couldn't bail her mom out. Her mom was still in pretrial detention. Brittany ended up losing the apartment because they didn't have enough money to pay rent, and she was working to try to save her money for college. So she was homeless till the dorm opened. And she told me she only had to sleep out a couple of times. And then she says, she tells me all this very stoically. Then, and my heart's breaking. And then she says, but I just got my first paper back here in college, and I only got a B+.
Oh.
And with that, she burst into tears. And I just wrapped my arms around her and held her. I mean, oh my God. And so then I asked her if I could have her autograph. And so we tore the paper apart that I had signed. And so she signed my paper. And then she says, could I put my mom's name down too? Of course. And so Brittany and Tony write around in my Bible. And how could I ever be fatigued with that? It's not possible. It's not possible. But if our hearts don't get touched by real people, then I think it's too academic, and we're having to generate the emotion where we're working on feeling, and we haven't wept. We haven't wept.
Could it also be possibly because we're not sustaining that tension?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Whoa, isn't that interesting? Yeah. That we're not content. That's there's going to be a long-term tension. Our heart's always going to be broken. Ooh, isn't that thought-provoking? Interesting connection. Which means it becomes more about us and wanting to arrive and being successful. Most of us have experienced success. I mean, people tell me I'm successful. It kind of makes me laugh. Successful at what? Annoying the Vatican, maybe?
Stomach acid.
Stomach acid. Stomach acid, I tell you. It's really important. Interesting. All right, y'all. I would urge you to a modicum of silence. Now, I understand that that may not be your forte, but the contemplative life requires listening, which Gerald May says in Will and Spirit, if you're saying to yourself, I really should pray more, I just really should have meditation, I should really do it, I should really do it, rather than beating yourself up about it, what he says is, say to yourself, yeah, you have a reason to be frightened of it, because it's going to require change. And if you do that, your resistance is reduced. If you acknowledge the fear of it, your resistance is reduced. And the second piece is, where you are resisting is the edge of your spiritual growth. That is where your spiritual growth exists. That's your next step. So it's always good to know where you're resisting, because then you know, where's something happening? What's going on? Cool. All right. So your questions for this time is, when have I had a strong sense of the Spirit's action in my life? How do I listen to the nudging of the Spirit? And when do I resist? So take a few minutes quiet, migrate to your small groups, and then...
Before we migrate, let's just make a couple of announcements.
Okay, can I end with a... Okay, you do your announcement, I'll end with a poem, and then you migrate.
Well, first of all, I want to say, Simone, thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom and insights and today. Just a couple of announcements. Some of you probably got the evaluation form on your way in this morning as you registered behind us here in the library. If you haven't received that form yet, there are copies on the side table here. There might still be some back in the library as well. We can bring some into the chapel too. Please do fill out an evaluation before you leave. It's so helpful to me and to Joni and to Steve as we plan for future events. We still need a couple of volunteers for Mass, which is just a half an hour away at this point. We need a reader for the responsorial psalm. Is that my understanding? We need a reader for the responsorial psalm. So Barbara Hairston in the back, thanks. And we need a second gift bearer. Okay, Carol Murnion, thank you so much. Great. And I think that's all I have for now.
So let me end with a poem. And this poem is called Incarnation, but